Hey everybody, welcome to the video. It's Friday, June 4th, and we're breaking down this massive 15 game slate that we have over on DraftKings today. Yes, I said 15 games. We have each and every single team going. Usually we have a straggler team that plays at like 6:30 or 5 that gets knocked off the slate. But no, we have every single team on the slate today. We have lots of aces on the mound. We have good cheap pitchers. We have Shohei Ohtani pitching tonight. We have Coors Field. So you name it, this slate's got it for the most part. So it should be a pretty exciting one. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure you guys are as well. And if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll also be posting my NASCAR video probably later tonight or on Saturday. So if you guys are interested in watching some NASCAR videos, it's a very fun DFS sport. I would recommend checking that out. And if you want to follow me over on social media, you know where to find me in the bottom right corner of your screen. And if you want to help support the channel over on Patreon, just get access to some extra content, the entire spreadsheets where you could download it. And it's got the entire player pool here. You got Optimizer and all that fun stuff, Discord community. Link is down below for that. And you cover other sports as well. But I think that's it for the plug. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as per usual, we'll start with the pitchers and move on to the bats. And to be honest, I think there's several ways you could go here. I think you could double spend it for a pitcher today. There's a lot of good cheap bats and good spots that I think are viable. So if you want to go like the Max Scherzer, Zach Wheeler route, or the Wheeler Peralta route, or something like that, I think that is certainly viable. I typically don't like to go above $20,000 with my pitchers combined, but some slates I will make exceptions for. And we have a big 15 game slate like this. There's lots of good value bats throughout the entire slate. So I think it's something you can do today. But obviously, if you want to spend up for some bats, you'll have to go with like a Scherzer, Ohtani, Scherzer Petit, or something like that. So I think you can go several ways here. Just depends on what you're going to do with your bats tonight. But let's start up top with Max Scherzer, $11,400. I think it's an okay matchup here versus Philly. They're not the scariest offense in the world, but it's definitely not the easiest matchup out there. And this is going to be a pitcher's duel in this game, considering two pitchers we have listed here are facing each other in Zach Wheeler and Max Scherzer, both very, very good pitchers. And Zach Wheeler has been absolutely outstanding so far this season, so he's no lock for a win. Max Scherzer isn't either Zach Wheeler, because both these guys, this should probably be a pretty low-scoring game for the most part. As you can see, there's only a 3.5 implied team total here for the Phillies and a 3.4 total for the Nationals. So we're going to have a bit of a pitcher's duel here. It's kind of a toss-up who's going to win this game, but both pitchers make plenty of sense, and both pitchers have been very good so far this season. We're going to talk with Max Scherzer here first, but 2.34 ERA, 3 xFIP, 2.6 SIERA, 36.5% K rate, not really walking too many guys. He always gives us some fly balls and some hard contacts, so it's like the one thing you have to worry about with Max Scherzer, because there's a couple decent bats in that Phillies lineup, but no Bryce Harper obviously helps things, because Scherzer the past few seasons has struggled with lefty power, so him out of the lineup definitely is a big boost for him. But 50% fly ball rate this year, a little bit scary. So is that 1.5 homer per 9, but not overly concerned here. It's Max Scherzer, one of the best pitchers in baseball. If you have the money for him, great. If you can't get there tonight, I don't think it's the end of the world, but I will imagine he'll be popular just because of the name value that Max Scherzer has and the talent that he has. So totally understand that. But if you want to save some money, or if you just want to play both these guys together, I have no issue with that. But we have Zach Wheeler pitching at home versus the Washington Nationals, who do have some pretty good bats in their lineup, so it's definitely not a cakewalk here. You got Trey Turner, Juan Soto, Schwarber's not bad, and you have some other, not awesome, but some other solid options as well. But Wheeler's been very, very good. Only a 3.4 implied team total here. He's a slight favorite, 8K prop, and the numbers this season, I think, speak for themselves. You don't have to worry about pitch count with him, about 100-some pitches per game, not 98 in his fastball. We know he can touch around 100, 2.75 xFIP this season, 2.9 SIERA, 31% K rate. Not quite as good as Max Scherzer, but the guy has been awesome, and he really limits the hard contact as well. Kind of the opposite of Scherzer, well, where obviously a great strikeout rate and everything, but a 158 ISO, pretty high fly ball rate, and a decent amount of hard contact with homers. But Zach Wheeler's allowing less than a homer per 9, only a 25% hard contact rate, and your 50% ground ball rate with only a 102 ISO. So don't really have any concerns here with either pitcher or these most cakewalk matchups in the world. No, I'd prefer if they're facing like a Seattle, Detroit, but they should be totally fine. And when I spend it for both of them today, I think that is viable. It doesn't always look the greatest on paper because you have to spend down with your bats, but on a 15-game slate, there's enough value to make that work. And I would imagine they're going to be very popular as well. So if you're looking for a pivot off those two guys, just ownership, because I mean the numbers would tell you just to play Zach Wheeler and Max Scherzer, but if you're looking for a direct pivot off those guys just solely due to ownership, Freddie Peralta makes some sense here versus Arizona. The guy's been great this year. I wish he was in the 9K range. 10,400 seems a bit much for him, given the slate that we have. And there's some pitchers that I think are a little bit over expensive. I think Frankie Montas and Coors Field's like 10K tonight. I know he's been good recently, but there seems a bit of a high price tag for me. But Freddie Peralta, I mean, numbers suggest he should be a solid play tonight. The guy's been good all season long. 3.3 implied team total against him, which I believe is the lowest in the entire slate. Pretty heavy favorite. And I do like the Brewers stack tonight, so would not be surprised at all if he can pick up a win here. And at $10,400, I'm probably going to need that win, to be honest. But numbers have been good this season for him. 2.3 ERA, getting a bit lucky considering the XFIP's about a run higher. Sierra's around 3, but those are still very strong numbers. 37.2% K rate is really good considering that's even better than Max Scherzer. Does around the double the walks, though, but, I mean, the guy's pretty strong pitcher. Doesn't allow much hard contact, actually less hard contact than Zach Wheeler. So if you want to pivot to Peralta just due to ownership reasons, I totally understand that. Arizona's not a team I'd be too scared of. It's definitely a hitter's park in Milwaukee, but outside of guys like Ketel Marte and maybe Eduardo Escobar and David Peralta, not overly concerned about the Arizona Diamondbacks lineup. I know guys like Carson Kelly and Christian Walker are there, but I'm kind of more concerned about them versus lefties than I am anything. So I think if you're just looking for a pivot, Freddie Peralta does make some sense, but I hate that price tag on him. And then if you're looking for some cheaper pitchers tonight, Shohei Ohtani, $7,600. He is always the ultimate tournament option because that walk rate just scares me each and every single time. There's no team total out yet for this game, but can't imagine Seattle will be too high. They'll probably be in the mid to upper threes, maybe the low fours, but I can't see them being like anything above 4.5 or anything like that. And for the most part, Ohtani's been good this season pitching. He's got a 2.7 ERA. Now, the XFIP and the Sierra are definitely a little bit worse than that, so he is getting lucky, which makes sense considering that walk rate all the way up to 17%. I mean, that's the one scary thing with Ohtani anytime you roster him is I hate rostering pitchers that have high walk rates, and Ohtani, he's got a very high walk rate. He'll load those bases up. He's not going to load the bases up, but he'll let base runners get on base, and it just definitely makes you a little bit nervous when you roster him because the guy's got a great strikeout rate, and he's been good for the most part this season. I know last game out he had like 12 points, which is not what you're looking for, but besides that, he's been in like the 20s, low 20s, and he's been good. And this matchup versus Seattle was nearly as good as it gets, so I'm not overly concerned here because Seattle's just not a very good lineup outside of a couple bats that do have some upside, but he's been good. 32.5% K rate. I love the strikeouts. It's just the walk rate scares the heck out of me, but he's allowing a really low batting average, less than a 100 ISO, near 50% ground ball rate, less than 1 homer per 9. So when you give me a matchup versus Seattle, I think it makes some sense here considering they have around a 26% K rate. I mean, that power's been okay, 155 ISO. Maybe a guy like Kalenic or Kyle Seager could take him deep, but I think Shohei Ohtani's fine if you need a cheap pitcher tonight. And we always know he's got plenty of upside. And just because of the name value, he should have some decent ownership here. But don't think we should be overly concerned about this Seattle lineup. And if you're looking for an even cheaper pitcher in a really good matchup, we have Cody Petit here, $6,600 home against Pittsburgh. And it is a pitcher-friendly park in Pittsburgh. And small sample size this season, about 21 innings pitched. He's averaging around 83 pitches per game. I think he got up to 93 2 starts ago. Then last start he didn't go very well. I think it was versus Boston, which makes sense because they're one of the better offenses in the league this season. And I think he only went around 60-some pitches in that game. But we know he's got upside of around 95. Could hit probably close to 100 if it is going well. And the numbers aren't terrible. I mean, they're not great, but he's only $6,600, so you have to keep that in mind. But ERA below 3. Sierra's touching 4, XFIP's above 4, so getting a bit lucky in that category. But the walk rate's good at below 5%, strikeout rate above 23%. And the overall numbers are okay. I mean, you got to keep in mind, again, this guy is pretty cheap, less than a homer per 9, 30% hard contact rate. Fly balls are a bit of an issue there, but Pittsburgh just has no power versus right-handed pitching. Like 116 ISO this season with an 82 WRC plus. They don't strike out a ton, but there's like no power whatsoever. They don't really walk a lot either. So if you're just looking for a cheap pitcher in a good matchup, Cody Petit makes sense, as does Shohei Ohtani. So plenty of options here. I would not double spend down for pitcher day. I mean, if you want to just do that and just go YOLO and just spend up on all your bats, I guess it's okay. If they both scored around 15-some points and the aces don't score like 30 plus, you'd be okay. But if you're playing cash games tonight or just one lineup, I'm probably going to use an ace, and then I would try to get 2 in. But if you can't do 2, I wouldn't mind just going 1 ace and then one of those cheaper options down low. There's a couple of other viable pitchers. I think I almost put Mitch Keller on here because he's in the opposite side of this game. Going up against Miami, that's a pretty soft matchup, and there's some other okay pitchers, but this is just the handful I wanted to highlight in this video. And with that being said, that'll be it for the pitchers, so let's move right on to the bats. And as always, we'll start with the catcher position, then we'll move around the diamond, hit the outfield as well. And we'll start up top with Salvador Perez, $5,100. I believe he went double donger yesterday. Not saying it's going to happen again, but the Royals get another good matchup here versus Minnesota with Matt Shoemaker on the mound, who's just not a very good pitcher. Looking at his splits this season, definitely one of the better pitchers to attack on this slate. only around 91 on his fastball, about a 6 ERA, 5 xFIP, 5 SIERA, 14% K rate, and a walk rate close to 10%. Also giving up over a 200 ISO this season, with the hard contact rate's not bad, 27%, but close to 2 homers per 9. And I'm liking all the Royals here. They've actually been a decently surprising good offense so far this season, so definitely think we can stack the Royals once again. And Perez has actually been really good this season, and I know they don't have a team total yet, but I would not be surprised if it's around 5, maybe even a little bit higher. It's not going to be quite the Oakland A's in Coors Field where it's close to 6 here, but it should definitely be a healthy team total, and a lot of these guys aren't overly expensive. I believe Salvador Perez or I guess Whit Merrifield would be the most expensive bat here. The other guys are pretty cheap for the most part, but over a 250 ISO this season and batting close at 285. Doesn't really walk a lot at all. It does have a decent K rate, but I'll definitely take the power upside here versus Matt Shoemaker. Sean Murphy, $4,500, just a decent hitting catcher in Coors Field. John Gray, he will have spurts of good games, but in Coors Field here versus Oakland, which gets a massive park upgrade going from Oakland to Colorado. I mean, that's one of the bigger park upgrades you can, I'd say, consider. I know the Trop to Colorado would be a major upgrade, but it's definitely one of the bigger ones you can get in baseball. And Sean Murphy, that does have around 170 ISO this season, low batting average, and does strike out quite a bit, but I'll take the power upside in Coors Field, plus for a decent price point for a catcher that does hit in a decent spot in the order. And if you're looking for a dirt cheap catcher, there's always a couple of options we could look at, guys like Ryan Jeffers, Jake Rogers. I do have Jake Rogers here, $2,200 just because he's facing a lefty here, which I know it's not much, but if you're looking for just pretty much a min-price catcher here, $2,200, 13 plate appearances this year versus lefties, it has not gone well whatsoever. I will say the one good thing, in 13 plate appearances, that he has a 71% fly ball rate. But going up against a ground ball pitcher in Dallas Keuchel, don't expect much here, but he is cheap, and if you just need someone to fill the rest of your lineup out, Jake Rogers is an okay option here, although I don't have my hopes up. Going down to first base, we have Matt Olson, $5,300. First base is looking like a really bad position today because I was just going down the list here. I'm like, outside of Matt Olson, I am seeing nothing I like at all. So I landed on Olson here. I could see him being popular just because of that, and he's having a good season so far, batting 275 with around a 300 ISO, and hits righties very, very well. Looking at his splits versus righties this season, 290 ISO, 561 slugging, only a 12% K with a 12% walk rate, and over a 40% hard contact rate. John Gray, not a terrible pitcher. I mean, his numbers aren't bad this season necessarily, around a 4.2 xFIP and a 4.5 SIERA with a 19% K rate, but I wouldn't say it's anything that gets me too excited, and we can definitely attack him in Coors Field. If this was in Oakland, I probably wouldn't have any interest in the A's, but since we're in Coors, it definitely makes some sense to me. So I like Olson, and this is a bad position for the most part. Lamont Wade, he's been leading off recently, $2,800 lefty versus Jake Arrieta. I know it's not a hitter-friendly park here in San Francisco, but in 30 plate appearances this season, Wade's not been terrible. 400 OBP, 840 OPS. Is striking out a lot, but a 374 WOBA, 160 ISO, and 280 batting average. I don't hate it just as a cheap option here. I've always preferred lefties versus Jake Arrieta. Then Daniel Vogelbach, $2,600. He got a few points last night. I know the numbers kind of suck this season, but Matt Peacock's not a very good pitcher. It's a small sample size this season, but 4.68 implied team total is decent. It's not like last night where they were originally going to play Seth Frankoff and they ended up facing Duplanter, that's what it was, Duplanter, whatever it was. But they had a pretty decent game. Yelich went deep, and a lot of guys on the Brewers ended up having solid games. $2,600. It's in a decent spot in the order left-hand righty matchup here versus Matt Peacock. I think he makes sense just due to the price tag. Dropping out of second base, we have Whit Merrifield, $5,400. Kind of what I talked about with Salvador Perez, and I'm going to view him as pretty much the same exact play as Salvador Perez. He just hasn't as much power this season, but Merrifield leading off for the Royals, which should be one of the better stacks in the entire slate. Would not be surprised if that's around 5 tonight, so I do like Whit Merrifield if you are full stack in the Royals. Jed Lowry, $4,000, just getting Coors Field exposure for the most part, because outside of Matt Olson, this is not a hard team to stack whatsoever. Like, most of these guys are cheap. I guess Mark Canha is a little bit expensive at $4,900, but you can easily stack these guys up, and even some of the guys I'm leaving off here, you can use them as well. But like Jed Lowry, switch hitter, he's always going to have a platoon advantage no matter what pitcher he's facing against, and he was kind of hot to start the season. Hasn't been the case recently. ISO's at 136 and batting averages down to 241. But again, like all the Coors Field guys, and $4,000 at second base, which usually isn't a good position. I think he'll end up being decently popular. Then his teammate Tony Kemp, $3,100. You can also play him in the outfield, but again, lefty on righty matchup here versus John Gray, and he hasn't been bad this year. Batting 280, 351 WOBA, better numbers than Jed Lowry, 131 WRC plus with a near 400 on base percentage. At that price point, dual position eligibility, like him quite a bit. Then dropping on third base, that's our third Oakland A we'll have in a row, but it's Matt Chapman. He's pretty expensive. I guess I kind of forgot to talk about him when I was mentioning the more expensive bats for the A's, but batting sixth in the order, righty on righty matchup versus Gray. Don't love it as much as some of these other guys, because especially with the price point, I prefer the lefties versus John Gray. But if you're just going full bore with the A's, don't hate getting Matt Chapman in, although I guess he wouldn't fit those 1 through 5 stacks if you're interested in that, but still wouldn't hate some Chapman exposure in tournaments, but I don't think you have to go there in cash games. Then a couple of cheaper options here at third base. We have Travis Shaw and Hunter Dozier. They're just kind of like, if you're stacking that team, you can throw them on here just because third base doesn't look great today. One guy I was going to put on here, but I ended up not, was Jose Ramirez because he's facing a lefty in Camden Yards, so I think he's one of the better home run calls the entire slate, just not overly in love with the Indians lineup today. But anyway, Travis Shaw, if you're stacking the Milwaukee Brewers, just another lefty here versus Matt Peacock. I know the numbers kind of are pretty bad for Travis Shaw. He had 0 points last night, batting below 200, but there is some power upside here. And then Hunter Dozier, $3,000. He went deep last night. And kind of like Travis Shaw, where he has a terrible batting average this season, but kind of like unlike Travis Shaw, where he's actually shown decent power this year with a 219 ISO compared to 152 for Travis Shaw. So if you're just stacking up the Royals, like this price on Hunter Dozier, also eligible in the outfield as well. Alberto Mondesi, if he's back in the lineup, he's pretty expensive, $5,000, but it's a small sample size this season, but he's been very good, batting 360 with a 360 ISO and a near 200 WRC+. Plus, obviously, those numbers will come down, but you have a little bit of power and speed upside here with Mondesi if he's in the lineup. And then JP Crawford, $2,900. He played well last night, had around 15 points, and I do like Shohei Ohtani, but if you're not playing Ohtani, then you want to spend up for the shortstop position today, because if Mondesi doesn't play, there's like really no expend up options I like, so I could see people just spending down, but Crawford's been leading off recently, only $2,900. Don't hate that because, I mean, he could easily get on base due to a walk and maybe pick up a bag as well, maybe. I'd be pushing that a little bit, but don't mind JP Crawford if he is indeed leading off below $3,000. Elvis Andrus, $2,500. He's actually been hitting the ball well recently. I know the numbers wouldn't show that this year, but the past week or so now, he actually has been putting up some points in the lineup, and now that we're in Coors Field, only $2,500. Shortstop position doesn't look that great today. I wouldn't hate getting there at only $2,500, just if you need to save some money. Then drop into the outfield. Again, a lot of these expensive outfielders are injured for the most part, or they're just in bad matchups, so we haven't really had any 6K or upper 5K guys to talk about recently. But we'll start here with Christian Yelich at $5,100. He finally did something. I feel like every time I played him this year, he just gets 0 points and strikes out 3 times, but he finally went deep last night. I think he had a couple walks, had a run or two, and had a decent game. I think around 22 fantasy points. Still not overly expensive here, just a left-hand righty matchup versus Matt Peacock, kind of like a similar play as yesterday. Not quite as good because I think Matt Peacock's a little bit better, but still in a very good spot here, and especially if you are stacking up the Brewers. Mark Canha, $4,100, should be leading off here for the A's in Coors Field. I'd have to imagine he'll be pretty popular because of that. Does have some decent power, over a 200 ISO this season, a 144 WRC+. I do like him quite a bit as long as you have the money for him. Ryan Tapia should be leading off for the Rockies. I have not talked about any Rockies yet, but I think they are playable. I just think Frankie Montas is a decent pitcher, and I'd much rather use the A's here, but guys like Charlie Blackmon, Ryan McMahon, maybe CJ Cron if he's in the lineup, Josh Fuentes, whoever happens to be in the lineup, I think they're all playable for the most part, but they're definitely not my favorite stack in the entire slate. Probably prefer the Royals over them. I definitely prefer the A's, and you can make a case for a couple of other teams as well. Andrew Benintendi, $3,100, just a cheap lefty here versus Matt Shoemaker, and while he doesn't have much power, he is batting close to 300 this year with around a 400 on base percentage, and 400 slugging and a 351 on base percentage. I don't hate Benintendi at that below 4K price point. Seth Brown, $3,400, potentially going to be batting cleanup here for the A's at $3,400. I think that would make for a very, very strong play over a 250 ISO this season. Terrible batting average, but do like that power that he's shown. Jorge Soler, $3,200. He's been terrible this season. I think he only had 2 points last night due to a walk, but there's a little bit of power upside here versus Matt Shoemaker. Don't hate it. Then Jackie Bradley Jr., $2,600. Colton Wong got injured last night, so I think Jackie Bradley should get bumped up to the leadoff position. I guess that could always change, but just my assumption would be that would be the case, and just a cheap lefty here versus Matt Peacock on a halfway decent stack tonight. But with that being said, guys, I think that'll be it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure to leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. Follow me over on social media if you want, and if you want to help support the channel over on Patreon, get access to some extra content. Link is down below for that. It's the beginning of the month, so always the best time to do so. But I think that's going to be it, guys. Hope the weather is wonderful wherever you guys are, and enjoy the start to your weekend.